We're
I think
live
we're
on
good.
YouTube.
Great, thank you. Welcome everyone. Sorry for the technical delay. It was on my end. I usually do these meetings from home, and the transition back to the mayor's office was fraught with a challenge in terms of my video. So I am both streaming on my phone and through my laptop here at the office. So appreciate everyone's patience. So of course, welcome to our council meeting. This is number 29, Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. We're delighted to see a number of you with us this evening. And before I begin, I will recognize MPP Steve Clark, who I believe is here alongside his assistant, Doug Brewer. Welcome. And I also recognize that there are ministry officials with us this evening, representing, of course, the Ministry of the Solicitor General, given the delegations, of course, we have and some of the conversation we expect. So thank you for being here, all of you. And we'll just get going. Of course, there are other items on the agenda this evening. In fact, council colleagues, I think certainly it will be a somewhat lengthy meeting. So I hope you have your tea or coffee and sugar to get you through. And of course, the first order of business is the meeting being called to order. Before I go to the agenda, I do want to shout out, as I think all council does, for the tremendous effort that our community is showing for participation. If you haven't checked the rankings yet today, we remain in the #1 spot, I think, for 14 days straight. So we do really want to thank all of the schools and churches and senior centers and retirement homes, daycares, clubs, recreational facilities, and of course, our own Municipal Advisory Committee on Health, Wellness, and Fitness that got this ball rolling. And a nod to Deputy Mayor, who also sits on that committee with me. So things are really coming along here. So we've got 9 days left in the Participation Challenge. We have been approached by Participation's national office. They've thanked us for the media engagement that we've been receiving and that Participation's been receiving. And they've advised us that we will likely be among, of course, the 1 in 50 communities that will be invited to make their case for the $100,000, which is, as many of you know, the grand prize. But the bigger prize, apart from money, is how many people are getting active and engaged and moving in our community. So thank you very much to all of those who are doing their part for participation. So that's the only thing I wanted to mention tonight. I'll just go to council colleagues in case there was any other issue that people wanted to address. Seeing none, I will go to then the approval of the agenda. And colleagues, I look for a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the agenda as presented. Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Strachian, thank you very much. And I'll look for comments and questions unless there is a concern about tonight's agenda. Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Good, thank you. So with that, I'll go to disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? Seeing none, then I'll move straight into presentations and delegations. And of course, we have 2 this evening. The first one is from Mr. Kirk Elbert and Ms. Colleen Linus. Kirk represents the Jail Opposition Group and Colleen Linus represents the Coalition Against the Proposed Prison. They're here for a joint presentation. And then we'll recognize Mr. Gregory Brown for a second delegation around the development of the Eastern Ontario Correctional Facility or Center. So I will turn it over to Colleen and Kirk for their presentation. We've allocated approximately 15 minutes for the presentation. So I'll try to keep an eye on the time to be respectful to our other delegations and the rest of the agenda, but we're glad you're here and thank you. Thank you very much for all of your work to date.
Thank you very much. It's Colleen Linus. I'll start us off. And just to say, we thought we only had 10 minutes. Okay. So, you know, if after our delegation, there's an opportunity for discussion, we're certainly happy to have that. So thank you. Secrecy and a lack of transparency. Words best used to describe the provincial government's behavior surrounding the proposed Grenville prison. Our delegation will include information received through a November 2020 access to information request related to the selection of Campville as the chosen site. We will also be addressing Council's recent statement regarding the prison and the letter from Deborah Richardson, Deputy Solicitor General, that preceded it. The full access to information release package will be posted on CAP's website, capcampville.ca, immediately following this presentation. For us, transparency is always key to this process. So stated Ali Veshkini, Associate Deputy Minister with the Ministry of the Solicitor General, Solgen, at the October 30th, 2020 stakeholders meeting regarding the prison. A commitment reiterated at the November 26th public session. The results of the access to information request reveal otherwise. 10 pages of visible content were provided. The remaining 135 pages related to the request were withheld. Even the small amount released reveals concerning information and critical facts that Solgen failed to provide to the community. We have probably looked at over 100 sites, a Solgen quote from the stakeholders meeting. At the later public session, that number had ballooned to 130. However, the released documents reference the assessment of only 38, with 6 and elsewhere 4 referenced as shortlisted. There is minimal to no information regarding the other sites, shortlisted or otherwise. We do learn that properties removed from contention fail to meet some of the same selection criteria Campville fails to meet or, quote, only partially, end quote, meets, including municipal servicing and, quote, natural heritage constraints and hazards with respect to the water course on the east perimeter and the woodlot on the southwest corner, end quote. Lack of public transit. Many have argued that the lack of transit is a factor that should have precluded Campville from consideration, yet Solgen and frankly, our council dismissed those concerns. Regarding public transit, a perplexing statement is found in one of the documents, quote, there is access to public transit from Campville to Ottawa, with the municipality looking to expand this service for the local community. The same document reads, IO, along with the ministry, will need to work with the municipality to investigate and determine the feasibility of the extension of services/transit, end quote. Did Solgen mistakenly think we have a public transit system? Did the province and the municipality have conversations about transit? Where information is provided on shortlisted sites, Campville is shown as the only one that fails to meet the preferred distance of less than 40 kilometers from the Ottawa-Carleton Detention Center, OCDC. Comments related to the distance support speculation that Campville may eventually replace the OCDC. Consider the following, quote, although this exceeds the ministry's criteria of a preferred distance, the ministry analyzed current staffing home locations, and the data demonstrates the majority of current OCDC staff live within the 40-kilometer boundary to the proposed Campville property, end quote. Documents also confirm plans to replace the OCDC dating back to 2017 and site searches for the proposed Ottawa Correctional Complex. Selection criteria included room for expansion, something Solgen failed to acknowledge when asked directly at the stakeholders meeting. Quote, the parcel at 178 acres meets the ministry's size constraints with potential future expansion if necessary, end quote. We need to ask ourselves, just how big could this prison eventually become? The answer to the increasingly perplexing question of why Campville was chosen may lie in the scores of redacted pages. We know that Steve Clark failed to advise and consult his constituents, even though the documents reveal that Solgen acted to formally place the property on hold and remove it from circulation on September 26, 2019, almost a full year prior to the announcement, As a cabinet minister and our local MPP, it is unfathomable that he did not know the plans leading up to and following that date. And I will now pass it over to Kirk.
Thank you, Colleen. Good evening. Tonight's agenda lists the North Grenville staff report, which was drafted to reflect the March 23rd special council meeting on the proposed prison. From our perspective, the report does not reflect with accuracy the range and depth of opposition to the prison conveyed by the 12 individuals who spoke that night. And we encourage people to watch the video on the municipality's YouTube channel to get a full breadth of the concerns tabled that evening. In preparation for our joint delegation this evening, questions for both the municipality and SolGen were submitted to you. Council's statement and SolGen's accompanying letter issued this past Monday did touch on some of the questions asked, but again, failed to provide the detail and clarity sought. Further, a number of our questions remain unanswered, including our request to Mayor Peckford to formally correct the record regarding erroneous comments that the prison would bring 500 local jobs. A few additional comments about Monday's statement from Mayor and Council and SolGen's letter. There is nothing revelatory found in those two documents. Council's hope to convince the province to situate the prison as far back as possible from the county road in an effort to minimize its visual impact has long been known. It is all a bit of magical thinking that somehow its placement will solve the significant negative impacts this prison will bring. We are now even more concerned about the potential environmental impacts, including prison placement on or near the floodplain, given the new information regarding existing heritage constraints and hazards that have already been identified as problematic, referring to it as the water course and woodlot, as Colleen mentioned earlier. The completion of an environmental assessment now reportedly scheduled for this fall is a base requirement. Reference to consulting the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority unfortunately provides little solace considering the steps that the provincial government has taken to limit the powers of all conservation authorities. On the topic of policing costs, the province has recently canceled all contracts with municipalities for the recovery of policing costs for correctional institutions. For North Grenville, this action will result in the potential for substantially higher costs to be borne by local taxpayers once the prison is operational. We urge Council to provide residents with a full accounting of the projected costs and how the municipality plans to fund them. Remember, we were told that there would be zero cost burden to the taxpayer. Regarding servicing and infrastructure costs, SolGen's letter from earlier this week stated what we had heard previously, that the province will take on cost for servicing and infrastructure associated with the new prison. The language appears to speak to one-time and not ongoing costs. We remain skeptical of ongoing cost coverage in this regard, given the history of downloading provincial costs to municipalities in this province and the lack of evidence to prove otherwise. And then there's the question of commitments made and commitments broken. Please ask yourselves, is coverage of servicing and infrastructure costs similar to the commitment made to provincial municipalities to reimburse in perpetuity policing costs associated with the respective correctional facilities? I think our mayor and council might want to consult with the mayor of Penetanguishene about the ministry's commitments made and then broken to him and their municipality. Regarding access to surplus land, again, we already know that SolGen routinely offers municipalities access to lands surrounding prisons for such things as sports fields and greenhouses. It was in their pitch at the public session for North Grenville, and it has been in all their previous pitches. Why do you think this is a necessary part of their routine? We anticipate they will likely accommodate your request in some form, but we certainly do not see it as a win for this community. Whether the land you seek access to lies in the shadow of the prison or on the section of land slightly adjacent, we now know SolGen will ensure there is still room for prison expansion. They made that clear in their documentation. Finally, I want to encourage our mayor, council members, and all North Grenville residents to review the 10 pages of documents that the ministry provided to us 7 months after it was requested. Those 10 pages paint a picture which bends rules to satisfy their needs, contradicts fundamental statements made to us by the ministry, and indicates a clear lack of truth and transparency. Really, the two key things we've asked for since the announcement. Imagine what else we would learn if they felt we, the residents, the voters, the taxpayers, were important enough to release the other 135 pages of documentation that they withheld. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk and Colleen, and apologies for what appeared to be some technical difficulties on my end this evening. I did hear everything, but I'm having to go on and off mute. Certainly, obviously, we appreciate your ongoing, concern, your considerable concern, and we've, I think, done our best to hear those concerns to the degree that we can. At this stage of the game. So we know that you've submitted 6 questions. We're happy to take a little bit of time to answer them now, if that's useful. I did just want to confirm the status of our other delegation, and maybe Ms. Babcock-Cormier can speak to that at this time.
So I'm not aware that Dr. Gregory Brown is currently on the call. I have received some messages from individuals that they are having some difficulty joining from time to time. I don't know if that's the case, but if Dr. Brown is on the meeting, if he could identify himself, please. And I'm not hearing that he's joined yet.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Great. So before going to council colleagues, obviously this has been a key preoccupation of council. It was a facility that we didn't see coming, nor did we expect. And like you, I would suggest that I've had to take the time to learn more, to ask questions, to talk with other mayors, to members of the community, the ministry, and of course our own MPP Steve Clark, who's here this evening. And there's no doubt that the community is divided, with some obviously in great opposition and others quite favorable. Obviously, at the same time, the reality is that investments in new facilities will, I think, provide some relief to the old and decrepit jails of Ottawa and Brockville, and are badly needed. I think they do provide a glimmer of hope in terms of the kind of experiences inmates may have while incarcerated. I recognize not everyone disagrees, but certainly it is our absolute expectation that this facility will be built to new standards. Beyond those considerations, however, my job, and I think our job as council, is to focus on the well-being of this community. And I believe as mayor that you elected me to have tough conversations and to not walk away from the table. And I worry that if I were to walk away from the table, I can't do the things that many in this community do expect, like advocate for a bigger setback while, not a perfect solution to any facility. Certainly, I think allays some of our concerns and our commitments to the tenants of Kempo campus, schools, daycares, and otherwise. We certainly couldn't get written confirmation of the ministry's commitment to bear all of its own infrastructure costs if we're not at the table. And we couldn't pursue what I think could be an incredibly innovative and important agricultural and community-driven project to reanimate some of the lands and buildings that do remain. But without being at the table, who would be advocating for those interests? I recognize it doesn't speak to what you believe is the value in opposition, the value in questioning the merits of the facility. But that being said, it is a critical part, I think, of certainly my job as mayor, is to be at the table, and that's the job and the responsibility I've accepted when I got elected. I will just, for the record, so we're clear, is certainly when the facility was announced, there was an attached 500 jobs articulated at the time, and I have recognized, I think in multiple fora, but I'm happy to do it again, that those 500 jobs were attached to the transformation of the correctional facilities across Eastern Ontario. So not just the one here in Kempville. That being said, we recognize that the bulk of the money is being spent here, and as a consequence, we expect that there will be some employment. Clearly, the facility will have 235 beds, so there is employment, but whether or not it's new employment is clearly less the point at this stage of the game. So that is something that, of course, I think in the hazy days of the news of the announcement, I was trying to digest information. I think MPP Steve Clark, who's on the call, was trying to digest information. We are all trying to get our heads around what it meant for this community to have this facility in our backyard. And as a consequence, at the time, the information presented to me obviously equipped me to believe that the 500 jobs would be attached to this facility, and I've obviously come to understand that they will be attached to facilities that are being rehabilitated or built across Eastern Ontario. I think I'll just go to council colleagues in the event that they have other comments or anything else to say in regards to the delegation.
Mayor Peck,
Councillor Barkley? Yes.
I know this is not protocol, but if I could just clarify that 500 jobs was in reference to the entire province, and I can send the document that the article that confirms that, the ministry statement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barkley?
Yeah, I'm going to start my comments on the premise that not a single job will be as a result of the correctional center for a resident. But what I want to talk to is business retention and expansion within the existing jobs here and small businesses here in North Grenville. Every day we see 70%, if not more, of the people who hold jobs in North Grenville drive out of the community with their wallets. And, we talk a great deal. There's a lot of concern in the community about losing the small town feel, and we are slowly becoming a bedroom community. So how do we balance that? We balance that against having people come the opposite way, first thing in the morning, driving into North Grenville with their wallets. And we're talking about 500 jobs. It's shift work. They'll be coming in at all hours. And I think that you'll find when you talk to small businesses in North Grenville who are involved in retail, food service, providing other services to the community, that they would welcome the chance to retain what business they have and possibly expand it. So, if we accept the premise that none of these jobs will go to North Grenville residents, we're still talking about well-paid employees coming into the community with their wallets in the morning and the evening and all times during the day and the evening, and spending their money here. I think it's great. Hopefully, the ideal scenario is the people who are working at the correctional facility will fall in love with the community, as many of us have, and will decide to live here. That's the ideal situation. You live and work in this community. But as second best, having 500 people come into the community with money to spend, I think the economic benefits are obvious. Thanks.
Other council colleagues wishing to respond to the delegation? Okay.
Nancy?
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Sullivan, I didn't see you. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I agree with Councillor Barkley. I've commuted to Ottawa and taken my wallet and stopped to shop on the way home, etc. Although I much prefer to be here. I think that one of the big points too is that the people who are incarcerated in a correctional facility, whether it's here or in Ottawa, we have to remember they are human beings, and that there are human beings who work in the facility, and that there are human beings who visit there, and there are human beings who live here in this town. And this is a very compassionate and caring community. And I think that people who find themselves in conflict with the law and end up being imprisoned need to be treated with respect and dignity and need to improve their status. They need facilities that are healthy and appropriate, and they also need programming. And I think that without a doubt, there are issues with the correctional facility. That is not an issue for our municipality to deal with. That's an issue for the provincial government and Solicitor General's office to deal with. But I absolutely think that they need proper facilities, proper programming, anger management, addiction support, to give them the skills that when they walk out, they're not repeat offenders. So I think we are a community that can welcome this facility into our community. I don't think the optics are going to be as bad as some people believe they're going to be. And I think that this is a community that could welcome this, as well as the influx of jobs and economic benefits that come with it. So that's my position.
Oh, I apologize. I was on mute. Councillor Sullivan, thank you. I'll just look to council colleagues. I don't see anyone, so I apologize if I'm missing anyone. You'll have to speak up. I will then ask Mr. Gary Dyke if we could quickly just look into, I know that we had prepared a response to the zoning question this evening, and perhaps Ms. Martin can speak to the zoning question that council was put to, that question rather was put to council in advance in regards to how we could manage zoning differently if it was felt that the facility was profoundly unsuitable for the lands for which they are currently slated. So maybe Ms. Martin, you can speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just briefly, the current zoning of the property is institutional, which does permit a public use. And in the zoning bylaw, in our general provisions, when it comes to public uses, the zoning permits a public use for any department of the government of Ontario, regardless of the zoning of any property. So the question that was posed to the municipality pertained to if we were to rezone the property from institutional to an agricultural use as a way of restricting the institutional use of the property. Our zoning provisions in regards to public uses would still permit that use regardless if the property is zoned agricultural or residential by virtue of our zoning provisions. And I just wanted to note that the municipality cannot punitively rezone a property, and that any zoning bylaw amendment that we would bring forward to rezone the lands that would restrict that use on the property is a public process, and the province would have the ability to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal any decision of council that would be to restrict that use on the property.
Thank you. I know another question that was obviously raised was policing costs, and certainly, you know, Deputy Mayor and I actually spoke with 8 mayors. We were reviewing the list today in order to get a better understanding of the kind of information we've tried to collect around the facility, its impact, how it integrates with the community or doesn't. And certainly through that conversation, through the several conversations we had, very rarely were policing costs raised. But that being said, there are communities obviously in Ontario that are raising the question of policing costs, and we've become aware of that. Minister Clark and I had a brief conversation on the cost recovery model as we transition into a new phase with the OPP. There's obviously significant changes under the Policing Act. I believe through both the AMO table that Mr. Gary Dyke, our CEO, sits, where also obviously MPP Clark, as Minister for Municipal Affairs, also sits. There are some focused conversations on how to ensure that communities don't bear a policing burden when it comes to correctional facilities. And I do think Kirk and Colleen, you're right to raise it as something that we have to be vigilant about. It's not resolved. I think we're optimistic given what we're hearing from the province, from other communities that are obviously have the benefit of experiences where they have been burdened financially with some policing costs. That there are many municipalities throughout Ontario that are insisting and seeking collaboration from the province on a new policing model when it comes to correctional facilities, whether they be provincial or federal. So I know that's something that we want to continue to work on. It isn't fully resolved yet, but I am, and I think council is fairly optimistic that we'll get there. And I don't know, I know Minister Clerk, I'm looking right at you, so I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that topic, or if Mr. Dyke would like to as well.
Well, no, I think you hit the nail on the head, Your Worship. Your CAO is part of AMO, where all of those changing policies get discussed. My conversations with the minister, and also this morning I spoke to Minister Dunlop about the Penetanguishene Council, and I don't believe that issue has been finalized by the ministry. I think you're very correct in your conversation about the fact that the ministry is still communicating to those affected councils and no decisions have been made.
Mr. Dyke, do you want to
just add that? Yeah, so we've been in contact with the Minister's Solicitor General's office talking about the policing cost issue. As part of those discussions they've spoken to methods or process they're looking at modifying that will reduce calls of service that originate from within the facility that would impact local policing costs. However, we have been adamant in our discussions with them that the increased policing cost needs to be addressed for us going forward. And also with respect to the area, I think the other thing that was brought up in one of CAP's responses was what's colloquially known as the heads and beds tax, which is the payment in lieu of tax. It's an issue that through AMO that I've been involved with a number of years. We've been lobbying the government to address that and to modernize that payment back to municipalities to cover costs. That's something we will continue to do. And as I would say to council, we should continue to lobby through AMO, through our own devices into the province to have them readdress the heads and beds tax to make it more equitable into 2021 dollars as we move forward. So we are aware of it. We are working on it along with our colleagues. We are working with other host municipalities to participate in a joint delegation at AMO with the ministers involved to discuss this very issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dyke. So I'm just reviewing the questions, Colleen and Kirk, because obviously you submitted them in advance. Some of them were answered in the staff response that was prepared, and some of them were left unanswered. So, just looking one more time. Obviously, there is a lot of concern about the fate of our college campus, or our former college campus, which is now proudly the Grenville campus, as well as the status of downtown revitalization and tourism, for which we are being fairly ambitious. And again, I think all I can offer, and I invite my council colleagues to add, is that in all the conversations we've had with mayors throughout Ontario that are hosting obviously correctional facilities, none felt that in any way those facilities detracted or undermined or compromised tourism efforts or any downtown revitalization. I accept that again that from your perspective that may be something that you're struggling with, and that's fair. Every resident in this community can have an opinion, of course, about their correctional facility, but in all the conversations we've had to date, it hasn't led us to feel that we're imperiling Grenville campus. And I think why we're so excited about the agricultural lands and the access to agricultural lands is because it does provide, I think, an unprecedented opportunity to access lands that, quite frankly, we may not have been able to purchase or otherwise use. So from that perspective, the fact that we are going to welcome the international plowing match next September, and Minister Clark was involved in some of the early dialogue around that well before the news of a correctional facility. I think the efforts around the plowing match, I think, allow for some momentum and some energy in terms of moving forward with continued access to the lands on which obviously the correctional facility will take up some space, but not all the space. But again, we hear you. We recognize that you do have great concerns, and you know, the conversation is evolving. But certainly, we feel that the opportunity to host the IPM is a fantastic, actually, moment, I think, for us to look forward to what can happen on the agricultural lands that will remain, and on which we certainly have a full expectation. And I know Minister Clark as well has been very excited about the capacity to facilitate some community-driven agricultural projects. And again, Minister Clark, you're here, so I don't know if there's anything you want to say in that vein, but I know it's something we've been working on together.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Your Worship. Having been involved in the last international plowing match in the riding in 2007, this is an exciting opportunity where upwards of 90,000 people can visit that site. The Deputy Solicitor General's letter allows our community to build upon the plowing match's success and utilize those lands and really fully realize the vision that this council has for those buildings and that property. I think I'm very excited about the Deputy Solicitor General's response, and it does give us a focus to build upon.
Oh, from that, I will certainly recognize you, Mr. Albert, but obviously the other prospects or the other questions around employment, apart from the initial statements that were made, and my understanding of what employment may or may not be generated here, I think has been addressed. And the kind of economic activity we will see from the correctional facility, I think, is to be determined. Many different people have many different perspectives on what it will look like. I think the tendering process, once we get there, will give us, I think, some more specificity when it comes to what the direct and indirect impacts will be. I think, from my perspective, I think our job as a council, and certainly my job as mayor, is to focus less on economic benefits in and of themselves, and to focus on ensuring that the community feels confident that their well-being and future growth and the vitality of the campus is not compromised. And I think that's certainly where we've focused a lot of our efforts in recent months. And the whole conversation around economic benefits, I think, will come in time, but I don't think it's what council is staking any of its enthusiasm or its appetite to remain at the table, which is, I think, our number one job at this stage of the game. So we will see those play out in due time, but I don't feel that at this stage it is the primary lens through which we're evaluating the project. At this point, it really is about ensuring that we do our best with our, limited powers. Our powers are limited. These are provincial lands, so our powers are limited. But we do our best to bring to the fore the primary areas of concern for a variety of members in the community, while also recognizing that there are some who are really waiting eagerly to see this thing come to fruition. So, and that's where we are at the present time. I'll hear from Councillor Barkley, and then I'll go back to Mr. Albert.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what you said, Madam Mayor, and my comments about what I saw as the obvious economic benefits should not suggest that I have unreserved support, or my support for the correctional facility is really conditional on the continued dialogue with the Solicitor General, aided by MPP Clark, and having constructive, positive conversations with him, so that our investment in tourism, in the revitalization of downtown Campville, in our economic support for small business isn't undermined. And so it really remains to be seen how wholeheartedly I would support the correctional facility. It's really conditional on going forward and how we resolve some of these concerns as they're expressed by the community. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm maybe then as we wrap up, we'll invite Ms. Linus to speak one more time. Certainly, all of the questions that were submitted, they will receive a fulsome response in writing. So that's that we wanted to have the dialogue with you this evening, and it's great to see MPP Steve Clark here as well, in case there were things he wanted to add, given some of the other issues that you've raised around OPP costing, et cetera. So I think it'll be helpful to crystallize some of these things in writing for the benefit of not just the people who are here this evening, of course, but for all those in our community. So I'll go to Ms. Linus at this stage.
Thank you. This may be a rhetorical question or a rhetorical statement. I think that the community certainly needs to have a very full explanation as to this discrepancy around this reported belief that Solgen had that we have a public transit system, and also any conversations that might have happened prior to or following the announcement between the municipality and Solgen regarding public transit. And then if I could just say at a more kind of personal level, I've watched a lot of municipal councils and meetings, and we've all seen they're very lively. Not everyone on a single council agrees with each other. That's what makes for a healthy democracy. And it's been very disconcerting for me to see people I personally backed and voted for and canvassed for in the last municipal election disappoint me so significantly in terms of their failure to really candidly debate and challenge and push back on the government. And there are so many examples of very healthy working relationships between different levels of government where you don't agree on everything. And disappointing for me tonight is when we presented this very, I think, shocking information, which points to no rational reason why we were picked when we did not meet so many of the selection criteria. When we now know that there's a plan for potential expansion and we were chosen as a result, and yet I'm hearing nothing from you guys, nothing. It's the same stuff, and it's just shocking to me. And the one thing I will say is you've been great about letting us speak our mind, and I really do appreciate that. And I think I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think I can go to Mr. Albert next. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. I thought I was in the queue previously, so I apologize. I lowered my hand. I just wanted to recognize Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Barkley. I appreciate them speaking, giving their side of it, because it's been roughly 7 months, and I think this may be the first time I've actually heard how their opinions on the matter. So I appreciate them doing so today. For a point of clarification, Mayor Peckford, could you state whether or not the mayors that you approached were in a position to comment pre-prison and post-prison, or were these mayors that during their tenure already had a prison in their community?
Both.
You spoke to ones that did not have a prison before they became a mayor, so they had a good idea of policing costs and infrastructure costs and negative impacts on their community before
Correct.
and after their tenure. Okay.
Well, that majority, Kirk, to your point, had them inherited them effectively, right?
Yeah.
But there were a couple of mayors that were in communities where new facilities were built, and they saw the evolution of the community sort of post the facility. But fair question.
The reason for the question is I know you did speak with the Brockville mayor, and I know you've consulted with them probably a few different times. Their
really.
facility, if I understand correctly, Brockville's jail holds 44 people,
Right.
And their population is 5-fold our population, and our facility is going to be 235 beds. So you can see the discrepancy. That's all.
Okay. I probably spent the least time talking to Mayor Baker, in fact, because we felt we should go further afield in terms of getting some of our information. But a brief conversation with Mayor Baker, of course, but we felt it was important to talk to as many mayors as possible. We still have 2 on the list, actually. So when we were reviewing today, so we'll continue to have those conversations because I think they do lend some insight. Okay. I'm just going to go to council colleagues one more time in terms of any thoughts. Councillor Strachan?
Not to reiterate anything that has been already said by the mayor or my council colleagues. However, I would like to say that I have spoken with Kirk before. I haven't had the chance to speak directly with Cap. I think we got our wires crossed on some of that, Victor, and I apologize. However, in my conversation with Kirk, I think we all agreed that, you know, nobody wants a prison in their backyard. I think when it comes down to it, a prison means bad stuff has happened. I don't think anybody really wants bad things to happen to anybody. And so a want for a prison is probably, not realistic. And I don't think we would want it for economic benefits or any other reason. And I agree that there will be some spinoff because of people traveling in and doing, grabbing their meals or groceries or whatever in the town. And I think the magnitude of that has yet to play out. However, recognizing that there are many decisions that are made at the provincial level that the municipality does not control and that we do not own the land. There are many good reasons, I think, for why the location of the correctional facility was chosen, even if it didn't meet all the criteria. So I've been in government long enough and been on big projects before that I know that there are lots of ways of balancing out different criteria. So I can let my mind go to how that would have played out and could have played out. Having said all of that, I'm a parent first in this community. My kids go to the school across the road from where the correctional facility will be. I'm very passionate about this community. Otherwise, I wouldn't have run as councillor to represent residents here. And we've heard from all different sides. And there's very passionate opinions on many different positions. And I think when it comes down to it is that this council does have the interests and the best at heart for this community and each of its residents. And so in all of these areas, the questions that you are raising and the points that have come up, whether it's the environmental side or the financial impact and so on, we are working very hard on that to make sure that there's a continued effort and a continued lobbying that's required to make sure that we make progress on areas that we know that perhaps other municipalities have not made progress on, but we will work together and know that that's done not for our own self-interest, but to make sure that we are putting our best foot forward and representing this community as best we can. So once again, I thank Colleen and Kirk, I thank all of you for coming forward with these concerns and bringing these questions to us. It is challenging on all fronts of this to address some of these things. And, we're doing our best to be able to give you this information and recognize that not all of it is within our control. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Deputy Mayor, and I would like to recognize Ms. Nadia Gray. So I'm going to do this round with council, and then I'll go to Nadia Gray. I recognize you are not part of the delegation, Nadia, but we know how much you care about the community, and I would like to share a perspective. So we'll do that now. Thanks. But I'll go to Deputy Mayor and Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I was hoping we'd probably go through the questions in a little bit more detail, but again, in conversations, I think we can get into the weeds on some of these questions. And I think, as you mentioned, it's important that we document this and give it to the groups in writing and to the public in writing. I want to say too that I don't agree with Colleen's statements on what we've been doing. We've been working hard for this community, whether she voted for us or not. The decisions we make, are very important to us and very important to our constituents, and we do care. She doesn't realize probably how many calls or emails I might get that are people who are interested in this prison and what it might bring or not bring. So there's a lot of sides to this that one group may not see. That as a councillor, we definitely see both sides and hear quite a bit, just like MPP Steve Clark would see. You always hear both sides, where groups may only hear one side. But anyways, besides that, I want to say that, and to reiterate that the transparency piece, I think, is not true. I mean, this council has been pushing hard to the province right from the get-go, and SOGEN, to make sure that we had meetings with all the different reps, with the hospital, with the school boards, with the residents on several occasions. And this was not presented from the province under for SOGEN right from the get-go. We pushed that. This was a council directive. We pushed hard to get the communication, to get you guys on these calls and get this information out. And we continue to do that. We'll continue to do that going on, just as Councillor Barkley mentioned. We're always asking more questions all the time. The mayor and I spent quite a few hours calling across the country, talking to mayors about their situation, what's happening in their communities. We brought up policing, we brought up travel and tourism, we brought up safety, all kinds of concerns. And, there was nobody that spoke. And, and CAP brought up before, the mayors are just protecting themselves. And, I'll call BS on that, because, that would be in the media pretty quick if there was really some serious problems. And at the end of the day, CAP has been asking a lot of questions. We've been answering the questions. We've had one-on-ones with them. They're saying that we're not answering the questions, or we're answering the questions, absolutely. And, I've told them from the get-go, while I was on the board, and I'm still on the board of the campus, that was not our vision for that property. Absolutely. I don't think it was anybody's. But I'm not going to stand in the way. And I've told you that before. I'm not going to stand in the way. So my position. Am I absolutely for it? I'm going to be waving a big flag for it? No. But I'm not going to stand in the way of it. It's going to get built, and I'm not going to waste my energy on a project, going against a project like that, when there's so many other things in this community needs that I work really, really hard on. And I'm also very passionate about that. This particular facility is going to be a much more humane facility than what I've seen so far. And all the other facilities are so run down. And you've got people packed into these buildings, or some of them 1800s built, early 1900s. It's absolutely horrendous. So yes, we're building a brand new modern facility that will have one cellmate and whatever the promises. And I know CAP will come up, the province has promised all these things, but you know what? We got to believe somebody sometime. We got to move ahead. But these older prisons, to me, have to be shut down over time. So we're not talking about expanding the system that I can see. I can see just modernizing it. It hasn't been done. It's been dilapidated for tens of decades, I should say. And it's about time that the government has spent some money on the facilities. I know in the past they spent money on the facilities, of course, but they lacked. The previous governments lacked the money on the services and the programs. And I think that's an important piece that seems to be missing. These programs within these prisons are very, very vital. Having a proper medical facilities inside, having proper programming, all that stuff, that's new and coming. And I'm very hopeful for that. When it comes to employees working here, the CAP is mentioned several times, that the mayor said 500 employees. Well, of course, she just told you, that she has reiterated that several times, that, that was the first comment that we saw or read. We know it's not true, but we know most of this expenditure will be in this area, just the nature of a brand new build and what on the size of it. And when it comes to employees, they're not all going to live here. We get that. I've surveyed many of the big businesses here in North Grenville. I'll tell you, the hospital has 39% of their employees out of 293 live in North Grenville. So 60% plus do not live here, do not spend, don't pay taxes or whatever. So I checked with the French the French Public Board. Stéphane Beauchamp, spoke to him. Less than 20% of the teachers actually live in North Grenville. They come from outside. So there's lots of examples of people coming from outside to work in our community. But I'll tell you, those nurses, those doctors, those support people at the hospital spend a hell of a lot of money here, and so do the teachers. When they're here, when they're coming and going, that's the surveying that I did. I've also spoken to many of the faith groups in North Grenville, and they're ready to step up. My own church has experience in that area. Our priest has spent many years visiting the the Birch Rapids facility while it was open, and also visiting the Brockville facility. So I've had lots of discussions about that. They're willing to step up and help. This is a humanitarian thing. It's going to be in our backyard. And I think, as Councillor O'Sullivan said, we're a very generous, compassionate society, and I think we can definitely deal with this. Public transportation. Well, you know what? Many of these other communities that didn't have prisons beforehand, Milton, so other ones are were very small when they started. They got 1,200, 1,500 mega sized prisons put in their backyard. Well, you know, the facilities that they needed that definitely came. So let's not put the horse before the cart. You know, yes, we're not going to have the social services in this town, but they will come if they're needed. That's typical of any type of growth or any type of expansion. So you can't all of a sudden say that we have more than enough people that will take care of social services. They're sitting around doing nothing, but once the prison's here, they'll be busy. That's not the way things work. So I found that kind of disingenuous. So anyways, that's just my comments. I am not standing in the way of this prison. I will not push against it. I think it's going to be a good thing for the community. There's going to be definitely some economic developments, especially what I spoke to with many mayors. I got a lot of feedback from that. And also speaking to residents of North Grenville and residents of Kingston and residents of Brockville, the prison is not going to be a concern. They don't find it a concern. These are residents who live with prisons all their life, and it wasn't a concern to them. So, I mean, if CAB wants to come to us and say, absolutely, this is my absolute problem with this prison. I find, you know, that yes, they, you know, maybe the province didn't come out with the information as quick as they should have, or didn't declare something, or why they picked us and not somebody else. Well, you know what, the bottom line is it's coming. So what's the problem with it coming? Where do you see, we have addressed the security, we're addressing the policing, we're addressing the economic, we're addressing the infrastructure, it's all going to be covered. We're addressing a lot of things. And I just find that the argument is getting weak and it's not definite. Sorry for going on and on, but I just, this has been a long haul and we're hearing the same questions over and over. I get it. The CAP and the job groups are passionate about this community, so am I. And all the power to you, keep going. We are going to get to the bottom of all the answers that we need for this particular project.
Okay, so I have Councillor O'Sullivan. I do see that there are now members of the community wishing to speak. Of course, the delegation format was far more structured than we've now become. So what I think at this stage I'll do, I'm just looking at the clerk here, is I see two hands. I'm happy to recognize Nadia, that I've already recognized, and Mairead for some closing comments from individuals who obviously are taking a great interest in this and may be members of either group. But then I think we will move on. So I'm just scanning the screen those are the hands I see right now. So I have Councillor O'Sullivan, I see Nadia Gray and Mairead, and then we'll move on. Okay. Councillor O'Sullivan.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. There's not a whole lot to add following Deputy Mayor McManaman's comments because he kind of expressed a lot of my feelings myself. I think that there are a couple of things that I really would strongly advocate for, and that is for the improved facilities and programming in this. I mean, that is what we can go to the Solicitor General's office and look for, because that is the key to correctional facilities as opposed to just a prison where people are locked up and forgotten. It's really important that they learn some skills and get some rehabilitation to go forward. With respect to the heads and beds taxes, I think that's shameful that it has not been addressed since 1987. My goodness, if the province didn't increase our taxes since 1987, I'd be thrilled, but that's not the case. So I think that really needs to be improved and looked at, and far sooner than later. Right now, $75 a year per person only adds up to about $17,000 a year in taxes, and that's really pretty shameful for the amount of property there. However, it is $17,000 more than they pay right now, because my understanding is that the provincial lands do not pay taxes to the municipality. So, but that certainly, I think, is something that really should be improved. They will be paying for water and sewer costs ongoing, just like any other institution. With respect to the optics of having a prison there, I've seen the prison in downtown Brockville, and I don't think it's going to optically look bad at all. And certainly the placement, it's probably not going to look a whole lot different than one of the large high schools or public schools that we have here. It's an institution. It will be modern. It will be a safe and humane place for people to be and to live and to work. I think that there's improvements to be made with the whole judicial system with respect to remand and bail and how long people wait for court dates and stuff. That again is the Solicitor General's issue, not ours, but I would really promote that and look for seeing the improvements made with that. Healthcare in-house. I personally have a friend who has worked at the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre for over 25 years, and she has shared with me some of the issues with the situations in there and the crowding and people being multiple people in one room as opposed to here where it's going to be single cell. And I think those things bring calls for service from the police far more than this will. The prison will also, or a correctional facility will also have their own security systems and their own guards. And I'd like to find out what the actual policing costs are for a provincial facility like this in other communities. Like how much extra will there be and how we can sort out how the province or the correctional facility will compensate us for any additional costs. That's important to me. Transit system, people seem to be hypothetically thinking that everybody's going to come from Ottawa and have to have their families or whatever visit back and forth from Ottawa. I don't think that's the case. It's an Eastern Ontario facility. I think people may be there from who knows where, Toledo, Jasper, Merrickville, Smith Falls. It could be from numerous places. I think public transportation that goes back and forth to Ottawa is not necessarily the answer to those issues. Certainly something that should be looked at and addressed. And I also did some research on the Millhaven and OCDC just when I was looking things up. And I looked at the distances from residential communities and schools. And Emily Carr School in the east end of Ottawa is less than 2.1 kilometers from the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre. There is a residential street with lovely homes that is 1.8 kilometers away from the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre. Millhaven has residential areas and schools also within 2 to 3 kilometers from the Millhaven facility. So I think that that's not necessarily a concern for the schools and the daycares that are across the road. I think people that are risks are more people that are not incarcerated than people who are. So I don't see an issue with safety for our community. My grandchildren also attend school in the Kemptville campus, and I personally walk the rail trail almost every day, particularly now with participation. And having a correctional facility adjacent or off to the side of the rail trail is not going to stop me from walking on the rail trail. So I think all of these things are valid worries, and I appreciate all of the efforts and the passion that Colleen and Kirk and other members of their groups have for this, but I have looked at all of it and I've listened to everything that you've had to say. I've done my own research. I've talked to, as I said, nurses who've worked in Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre. I checked out other places as well. And I have friends who were neighbors and lived in the area of the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre and have not had an issue. In fact, their teenagers worked there as part-time jobs. So that I will not stand in the way, but I will push for good programming good facilities and to make sure that this does not impact the taxpayers' costs in North Grenville. So that's my feelings and that's my position.
Thank you, Councillor O'Sullivan. I'm just making sure I have audio. I do. Okay. So thank you, Councillor O'Sullivan. Again, cognizant of the time, but seeing that there are 3 people with their hands up now, these are the 3 people I'm going to recognize this evening. This is not a community forum on the correctional facility. There will be one this fall. That being said, I am, with your indulgence, Council, I will recognize Nadia, Mairead, and Victor. I'm going to watch the clock, so I think we should try to wrap this item up by 8 o'clock. So I'll start with Nadia, and I really would ask that you sort of confine your comments to 5 minutes each if you can. Thank you.
Good evening. From the start, that all of you are elected to be reasonable, talented people who love the community. I don't dispute that. I think you've tried hard. I was a relatively senior public servant in the federal government. I understand that you have to make choices and very difficult choices. However, I think you all started from the wrong premise. Mr. Clark, at the very beginning of the announcement, said in his piece that this is non-negotiable. That is my problem with this. In that you own many lands that have gone fallow where there were existing institutions that you could have knocked down and built new ones. That kind of thinking didn't seem to have taken place at all in anything that anybody said. But my main concern is, I went back and I read, what are the plans? What is the policy for planning in Ontario? What are the objectives of planning in Ontario? Oddly enough, farmland, green, community, participation, all the things that are not part of this project, in my opinion. Why am I concerned? We've been here since 1982. I've been a member of the community that's been active in the past. We started the Dandelion Festival, an arts festival, all sorts of other things. And the creativity in this community is phenomenal. The giving in this community is stellar. But what I see happening is it's going to be a cookie cutter, Penetanguishene, or whatever you, nice towns, okay. But somebody came in and on top of that town, on top of the things that people dream about for their town, somebody came, Mr. Clark, and you said non-negotiable. No explanation. We are now a long time into this process. People have rushed around trying to get it. Mayor Jim McMahon at one point very kindly phoned me, and I'm just a resident. I'm just one voter. But kindness, you're stating that we should be caring for the people once they come into our community. I don't dispute that. I might even work there as a volunteer. What I dispute is you are killing the top creativity. There's this land, it is going to be impacted. Yes, you can smile, you can do whatever, but there's no going short when you start out with the mayor saying that Ontario owns the land. Hey, I pay taxes in Ontario. I'm an Ontario resident. There's an overlay that simply accepts that this had to be from the start. I would have liked to have seen, and still would, what other real effort was made, because this is your constituency, Mr. Clark, and 2 of the places are going to be built in your constituency. You're the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And I ask you particularly, what is it that is so special about this place that you couldn't have had somewhere else, less expensively, less removed, and not impacted the town as much, because the southern entrance to this town is still pretty. It's still there. Okay, it'll get developed and stuff, but it would be the community that did it and not an imposed, non-negotiable. And frankly, the rest of you, yes, you work hard. Yes, you try hard. Yes, you got elected, but you never stop to say, hey, what we're going to do, COVID or not, we're going to have a real discussion in the community. Because yes, I horned in on this and I'm speaking, but many in the community don't even know this is going on, or if they know, they don't know how to access it. This is during COVID. When this is over, are you willing to talk about it? But you've probably already spent money, hired all sorts of people to look into it in terms of developing and all that. And that's what I object to. I object to the methodology, to the non-transparency, to the dictatorial way that Ontario does this. Thank you for listening. I thank you all for your hard work, because I recognize that you probably work extremely long hours, but this has to do with the wrong way around. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Nadia. Deputy Mayor, I see you gesturing. I do have Mairead and Victor there. Is there anything you want to say before we move on?
No, not really. Just other than to expand on what Doreen mentioned, that she mentioned the head tax. Well, just want to be clear, that's not just for prisons. Of course, it's for hospitals and universities and other provincial government facilities only pay that. So that's a topic that needs to be brought up, of course, at the provincial level to make a fair playing field. I'm sure the hospitals would like to see more dollars too, right, Mr. Clark? Anyways, that I just wanted to make sure that it's not just for prisons. So this is across the board, pretty much.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. So I will recognize Mairead and then Victor.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, you're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going on a similar thread to Nadia. I do, first of all, want to thank the Mayor and Council for your work that has brought us this far and that has pushed for this debate to occur in the first place. As everyone has mentioned, the project was imposed suddenly, and it's not something anybody would have foreseen. So we're here and we're discussing it. I would like to speak more as a resident of Ontario, a taxpayer in Ontario. I think that's a little piece that's kind of missing sometimes. In general, I have two major issues that I don't see getting resolved in the short term or long term. So I think we need to look at the record of the correctional system. They're knowing that there's 70% of people on remand, reading every once in a while the issues that are going on. I mean, I know that Doreen mentioned a friend who works in the OCDC. I don't know if she mentioned the COVID outbreak that's happening there right now, and the fact that the inmates didn't get their vaccines as early as the employees. So, I mean, there's numerous things, and you can go and read the latest news articles and all that. I don't need to get into it. That is just the number one thing that I'm thinking about when we are accepting this facility into our community. The second thing that hasn't been discussed at all today was actually brought up in a previous consultation when Lorraine Reckmans spoke on behalf of some Indigenous people. And that is the fact that the land is still Indigenous land. And we're going to use this facility to do what? To incarcerate a third of that population? It's really abhorrent. It's not something that I would be proud of my community taking on. And it's interesting because it doesn't mirror a lot of the things that Councillor O'Sullivan and Barclay have brought up about us being such a caring community. And we are, and we're caring and we're generous, but I think it needs to come from more than just our general actions. It needs to come from what projects we decide to move forward with, what we decide our future is in this community. That's all I'd like to say for now. And I do invite MPP Clark to address the questions that came forward from Nadia and I if there's time. And I'm happy to listen. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Maybe I'll go to Victor, and then I will ask MP Steve Clark if he would like to add anything before we close it out. So thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. You can hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So just some quick comments. CAP certainly hopes that council knows the difference between anecdotal evidence, such as talking to other mayors, and published research, published evidence. Your Worship, you also note that there are different opinions and perspectives out there, but a project like this is not a popularity contest. We would hope that your decisions are based on actual verifiable evidence. Jim, I guess one question I feel has not been answered is, have you done an impact study that the prison would have on the campus master plan or the tourism strategy or the revitalization of the downtown prior to concluding that you don't want to get in the way of the, of the project? Doreen, same thing. You talk about economic benefits, but on what actual evidence, as opposed to what a professional friend might think, even though it might be informed, it's not actual evidence. And in the absence of any evidence, then really it's not much more than wishful thinking. And John, I have to say, I'm very discouraged to hear you still say 500 jobs after 9 months since the announcement. Everybody's had plenty of time, and the mayor has made it clear that it's not 500 jobs. Although, Madam Mayor, I will say that when you had a question asked to you at the Chamber of Commerce meeting, you did not dispel the notion of the 500 jobs. But John, it's not 500 jobs. And yes, wallets travel back and forth. But again, I would hope that you would be able to zero in on what the situation will actually be, and again, rely on evidence for your decision making. That's it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So I'm just going to recognize MPP Steve Clark in case there's anything he wants to add. I see Councillor Barkley wanting to perhaps make a final point at this stage, and then I'll close it out.
Yeah, no,
MPP
I just,
Clark?
again, I really appreciate the opportunity to have the local group and the individuals put forward, their positions. I respect your position, and I want you to know that your council has been tremendous advocates to ensure that the Ministry of Solicitor General responds to the community's concerns. And I think, again, the Deputy Solicitor General's letter, which has been released publicly by the council, really does set out those two issues regarding infrastructure and regarding the economic development opportunity for the college lands. In terms of what was said about remand and about OCDC, I'm not the Minister of the Solicitor General, so I'm not particularly sure I have those have that information at my fingertips about those who are Indigenous that are incarcerated. Nor Nadia, sorry. I'm not trying to debate. I'm just trying to say I will endeavor to speak to the Attorney General's office and the Ministry of Solicitor General's office to get some of those statistics so that we can have that conversation based on facts, as Victor said. But I also want Nadia to know that I didn't lead the site selection process for the Ministry of Solicitor General. I'm a local MPP. I'm working with my local council on getting answers for the community, and I appreciate the work that they've done to be able to do this level of consultation. I don't believe that any other community that was part of the Eastern Ontario announcement has had anywhere near the consultation process that we've had in North Grenville. I think that's a testament to this council and this community wanting answers. And I said right from the very first time we had this conversation that I would do my best as your MPP to get those answers for you for those questions. You might not agree with me. You might not agree with the decision, but I want you to know that your council has been tremendous advocates for you, and I've worked side by side with them as part of the process. Are there more questions that I'm sure the community will want answered? Obviously, I think that's true, and we will work with the community and work with this council on getting those answers. But I think today is a day where we can move forward with the facility, but at the same time, continue that conversation locally.
Thank you, Minister Clark. So I'm going to go quickly to Councillor Barkley, and then I'll just provide some closing remarks before we move on. Go ahead, Councillor Barkley.
Yeah, obviously, there's a couple of things I'd like to comment on, and I'll try and be brief. Issues of the justice system and Indigenous rights are really beyond the purview of this council. We all have our own personal feelings about the justice system. Mine were formed during a 30-year career of producing educational resources, many of which dealt with social issues like the justice system. And so I'm very well aware of the deficiencies of how we deal with offenders and how we treat victims of offenses in the province. And Indigenous rights, again, I think there's very little that the municipality can do other than symbolic gestures, that we should really be putting pressure on the federal government to make good on the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So as far as Victor, Victor, I'm surprised. We had a fairly lengthy discussion after the March 23rd council meeting in which CAP presented. Yeah, I note that there's other people that I've had one-on-one conversations with attending tonight. Mary Therese, hello. And I think in both of those conversations with Mary Therese and Victor, I was quite clear that when I'm talking about jobs, I'm not talking about jobs that would be filled by residents. I'm talking about employees of the correctional facility. And from what I understand, the ratio is 2 to 3 employees per inmate. So if we're talking about 235 beds, I think it's rather conservative to say 500 employees will be coming into this community. And in speaking, if a study might be warranted, about the economic impact, and I know it's anecdotal, and perhaps, Victor, you'll discount it. But similarly, I would discount some of the studies that have been touted out about facilities in upstate New York. The American justice system is very different than the Canadian justice system. They have their problems, we have our problems, but they're both distinct and unique. So as Councillor O'Sullivan said, I welcome new programming and resources in terms of staff to help the residents of this facility really turn their lives around. But again, Victor, 500 or more people coming into this community in daylight hours when our local businesses are ready and willing to serve them, whether it's food or gas or repairs or counseling, for example, whatever. I think it's a boon for small local businesses that have certainly struggled through COVID to remain open. And in terms of retention and expansion of those local businesses that create a lot of employment, 80% of jobs are created by small business in this community. I think it's obvious to me, and if you want to quantify some of my anecdotal information, it remains to be seen. But I think I'm quite confident that business will be supported, local businesses will be supported through the building of this facility. And again, my support for this facility is reserved. It's conditional on continued dialogue and working with the Solicitor General and MVP Steve Clark for the best results for this community. Thank you.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for being here. I think conflict is hard, right? And I think tonight and well before this evening, there are conflicting views in the community. And I don't think anyone relished, certainly I didn't relish, ever being in this place where we wouldn't be able, I think, to better address some of the opposition that is being expressed by the facility. But at the same time, I think you can see there is no groupthink here. Council colleagues are very unique and individual in their life experiences and their perspective. And I respect and appreciate all of them for doing their own thinking and reflection on this in terms of where they've ended up this evening. And I feel that what's important at this stage, because I, as a leader, as a community leader, I fight fights I can win, quite frankly. And I believe the best fight around this development is being able to use lands that won't be used by the facility, that can really animate the community, that can complement what's happening at Grenville campus, that can create new spaces, old spaces, but obviously new spaces with community-driven agricultural projects. And that's where a lot of my passion has laid. I, as chair of the Grenville campus, as Jim knows, one of my first meetings with Minister Clark very early after I was elected was to talk about agriculture and really think about what can we do as a community to really embrace and leverage what we can because of the loss of Grenville College. And obviously, I think Grenville campus is growing and evolving in really important ways and exciting ways through apprenticeship programs, through all 4 boards, increasingly having a place on the campus, through daycares. And I think it's critically important to focus on what we can control. And what we can control are some of those lands. And I recognize the work MPP Steve Clark has done to be an advocate and a champion for that, alongside myself and Minister Sylvia Jones, because that is fully, I believe, and I expect should be in the realm of our control. I don't think we're ever looking at a mega facility when we're here, when we talk about the correctional facility. I don't believe that's coming, but more to the point, I believe we take up our space on those lands, and we do that through the agreement that we are striking with the province for those lands that aren't being used by the facility to be a community space, to be a place where we can have community gardens and community greenhouses, and we can do learning and gathering in new and different ways that often the campus isn't able to accommodate because of some of their constraints. So I really believe that we need to focus on where there is opportunity. We absolutely have to address many of the concerns that have been raised by CAP. And I was an advocate for 20 years before I was an elected official. And I commend and recognize the tremendous energy you brought to this. And I think you've kept it real and you've kept us accountable, and that's critically important. And I think that's why we've always wanted to ensure that you've had the space you needed to articulate your concerns to us as a council and to the community. But at this stage of the game, really, I think we need to focus as much as we can on the elements over which we do have more control and jurisdiction. And if anything ever goes off the rails, and I think Minister Clark would agree with us, if it became apparent that there were real challenges in terms of the dialogue we were having with the province, if we weren't dealing with a ministry that wasn't responsive, that didn't have the courage and the wherewithal to face this community, as it did, and as it has, and as it will again this fall, then I might come to different conclusions. But I am where I am this evening based upon the kind of dialogue we've been able to have, with our other levels of government, with the ministry, and with all of you. And I do appreciate that you're here, and that obviously we're clearly not aligned on the fundamental piece, and that's to be acknowledged, and nobody's hiding from that. But we still look forward to the ongoing engagement and dialogue for what it is. And you can certainly evaluate our performance in approximately 14 months. You will have that chance. And if we're not to your satisfaction, that's what democracies are here for. So we can only bring our best to the table. And I can assure you, we have spent, certainly I've spent hundreds of hours reflecting on this and really wanting to act with integrity. But if you won my opposition to this facility, I don't think I would be acting with integrity. I think I would not be a person who was honest to myself or to the community about where I think things lie right now and where we need to go. But I will be judged like all of us on this, and that's your want and your right, and I respect that. So I want to thank Minister Clark, obviously, for sticking with us, Minister Clark. I appreciate that, and members of the ministry, and certainly our staff who've also invested a lot of time and energy in terms of striking a productive, a responsive, I would characterize it as a meaningful relationship with the ministry now, because there's lots and lots of questions we've asked them and we've expected answers. And if Gary hasn't gotten them from Ali Bishkini, I go ahead and ask them anyway, as MPP and Clark knows. So we're pretty clear that we want answers, and they won't always be to everyone's satisfaction, but we want the answers, and we want the engagement, and we want the conversation. So thanks to everyone who's been here. We're going to take a quick break for 10 minutes, and then we'll move on to the other pieces of the agenda this evening. So if the clerk's office could mute cameras and videos, that's what we'll do this evening. Thank you.
Hi, Heather. What time do you expect us back?
You're on mute.
Thank you. I'm just readmitting the mayor now. I believe we were having some technical difficulties again.
Did you turn off my video, Heather?
Yes, you'll just need to turn it back on.
Mine won't turn
It
on.
says I can't start it because you stopped it.
Yeah,
Okay.
mine says the same.
Just turning it back on.
There we are.
Hi, Heather.
Yeah, we're live
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
on YouTube.
I'm just testing my audio video because I'm running off 2 different systems. Are we good?
We are. I have all
Okay.
members of council. Thank you, Your Worship.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm just going to go back to the agenda for a second. So give me a sec. Okay. Okay. Oh, of course. I'm just revisiting. We've just finished our delegations this evening. We regret that Mr. Gregory Brown, Dr. Gregory Brown, was unable to join us. We have had some technical difficulties, which is unfortunate. So we look forward to receiving him another time, should that become an option. Under consent agenda, colleagues, you'll see there's a number of items here. Certainly the one that I have advised staff that I would like to have a short presentation on is the pedestrian crossover installation to Ponsia Drive at Glen, Crest and Harvester Crescent. So I would like to move, or not move, but I would like your indulgence to have that item pulled, and I will look for a mover and a seconder in regards to the consent agenda with that removal acknowledged. And I don't know if there's anything else. Councillor Barkley, Councillor Sullivan, are you moving and seconding?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, the recommendation is that all the items that are listed here, except for number 3, pedestrian crossover installation, be approved as part of the consent agenda.
Sorry, Mayor Peckford.
Yeah.
Is Chief Oakham on the line today?
I would have to ask Mr. Dyke. Mr. Dyke?
Yes, he is.
I would like to have the fire service review pulled as well, please.
Okay. So then we'll pull mover and seconder, Councillors Barkley and O'Sullivan. We are asking that you move that the following consent agenda items be approved as listed in our agenda, except for items number 3 and item number 4. I'll call the question on that. All in favor? Okay, thank you. So moving on then, we'll go to minutes of previous meeting. Those have just been adopted. Mr. Dyke, under Office of the CEO, of course, we have dealt with some of the questions that were presented by CAP in advance of the meeting and during the meeting. Is there anything else you'd like to say on this piece?
No, you were, other than to say that we will be following up with a written response to the CAP questions that we'll make sure it's available to the public.
Okay, perfect. I think we'd appreciate that. Thank you very much. And then, so I'm sorry.
All right, my apologies, Your Worship. There was a motion just to receive the CAP presentation and the job presentation.
Okay, so I'll look to a mover and a seconder for receipt. I see Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Strack again, moving and receiving the presentations this evening. Is that the ones you speak of?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, so I'll call the question then. Colleagues, all in favor? Good, thank you. So now we'll go to Grenville County Detachment Board proposal. Of course, this is something that Mr. Dyke and I have been working on. Mr. Dyke, I don't know if you want to introduce it substantively or not. Certainly, it's been an effort by all 5 mayors in the Grenville County to find a way to ensure that North Grenville's interests are well represented through hopefully what will be a future board with North Grenville alone, as it turns out, and with 2 other boards that would represent other municipalities in the counties. And of course, to remind those who aren't familiar, with this item. This is as a result of dramatic changes that have been made by the province of Ontario when it comes to the Police Services Act and the stipulations and considerations for police services boards. So I want to thank Mr. Gary Dyke, who's done quite a bit of work in supporting all 5 mayors, including myself and those others in the Grenville area, to come to some concrete conclusions about how we might be able to move forward to ensure everyone feels they're getting the representation they need for OPP services. Mr. Dyke, do you want to add?
Just simply, Your Worship, that this is in response to the changes to the Community Safety and Policing Act, which effective at the end of this year will disband current police service boards across Ontario, and they'll actually create what is being called OPP detachment boards. We are in the Grenville detachment area for the OPP that includes us and 4 other municipalities. As evidenced in the report, we have met with them and come up with a proposal to submit to the province that will be done by the end of this month. Wherein we will create new detachment boards, of which, given our size and demographic differences from the other 4 municipalities, there will be a standalone board for North Grenville. The one difference being, as stated in the report, we're actually looking to increase the size of the board from 5 to 7 members. And the reason being is the intent behind the new legislation was to increase community involvement in community policing and community initiatives within the community. And this will allow council to appoint a greater number of community members to the Police Services Board. So that is the recommendation of staff going forward. Similar recommendations going forward to the other 4 councils. I believe we are having a follow-up meeting with those mayors, I believe tomorrow morning, to finalize the report going into the province. And with that, Your Worship, I'll entertain any questions council may have.
Okay. So council colleagues, I'm quite familiar with this process, as would Councillor Barclay be, who now chairs the Police Services Board. So we've had the benefit of one meeting under certainly the period of time for which Councillor Barclay has been chair of the PSB, and prior to this year, there were multiple meetings with Grenville mayors when Mr. Don Sherritt was chair of the board and when Bruce Harrison sat on the board about this very issue, how to make sure that North Grenville's interests were protected. And, quite frankly, the Grenville detachment overall could be served, through oversight bodies, which obviously are police services boards at this stage of the game. I know Ms. Deb Wilson is, I think, still with us, and she sits on our local police services board, and she's been part of some of these conversations. Any questions at this stage about the proposal? Not seeing any. We will certainly keep you posted. We do have a critical meeting tomorrow morning, and then, as Mr. Dyke said, then really once hopefully we've landed somewhere we can all get behind tomorrow morning, we will be submitting a proposal to the province, and it is really up to them once again to give us the green light. But they have clearly indicated that they have a lot of appetite to see if the various detachments or the various municipalities served by each detachment can find a way to feel confident in their own representation through future PSBs. And that's really what we're working towards now. So if there are no questions, and I don't see any, then I will ask, I think, for receipt of the report. Ms. Bacroft-Cormier, is that what you would like at this stage? We are endorsing. Oh, 1 second. Grenville County Detachment. I see. Okay, I've got the motion. Thanks. So, Councillor Barclay, perhaps you consider moving this, and that is that council approve the Grenville County Detachment Board proposal, direct the clerk to circulate this report to the clerks of the local municipalities and the Solgen, which I believe has been done, and direct the clerk to submit the Grenville County Detachment Board proposal to the office of Solgen on behalf of Grenville County OPP Detachment Area municipalities. Of course, this is contingent on us getting somewhere, which I think we will tomorrow. We've had some very productive discussions. Can I have a seconder for that motion, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll call the question then. All in favor, please. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on then. And this is the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Once again, colleagues, you were all invited to our Partner Day about a month ago, where many different elected officials, service providers, agencies, champions, advocates had the chance to come together and look specifically at how we could create a community safety and well-being plan that would allow municipalities to work effectively, not just with the OPP, but with service agencies and others who advance community safety and well-being in North Grenville and in the United Counties. And I believe, Ms. Janou, are you here to speak to that this evening?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So before you start, I'll just say that Robin Jones from Westport and myself were champions, if you will, mayoral champions of the advisory committee that oversaw the process for what it was. And this was a very tight process. There was a 3-month period for which the United Counties engaged some consultants in order to advance the work. But there's certainly more to come, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Janou with that.
Okay, so thank you, Council. As you mentioned, I'm here tonight to present the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan for the United Counties of Leeds Grenville and the town of Prescott. So in accordance with the Police Services Act, municipalities were required to create a Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan by July 1st of this year. Upper tier municipalities are responsible for the creation of these plans. The United Counties of Leeds and Grenville and the town of Prescott convened a multi-sectoral advisory committee who completed the plan for the 10-member municipalities as well as the town of Prescott. The plan identifies risks and proactively develops evidence-based strategies and programs to address local priorities related to crime and complex social issues. These strategies can then be implemented. The plan is about preventative action and identifies areas to promote and maintain community safety and well-being through social development and proactively reduces risk through prevention programs and activities. The United Counties of Leeds Grenville and the town of Prescott engaged consultants Jane Torrance and Stephanie Gray of Big Thinking to complete this plan as prescribed by the legislation. A multi-sectoral advisory committee was assembled for this process, and as Mayor Peckford mentioned, Mayor Robin Jones and herself were the co-champions. The counties have asked the lower tier municipalities to endorse the plan before their next county's council meeting on June 24th in order to meet this July 1st deadline for adoption. The advisory committee members, consisting largely of community agencies representing the region, have expressed their willingness to continue working towards implementing the strategies outlined in this plan, alongside the municipalities. It is this team that will finalize and prioritize the actions in the plan. The composition of the implementation team, reporting frequency, mechanism, and structure has yet to be finalized, but North Grenville will strive for local inputs to be considered in the implementation plan, ensuring recognition of individual community needs and proportionality of services. That's all I have for tonight, but I'm happy to take any questions.
So, council colleagues, any thoughts or insights at this time? Certainly this is draft, as Ms. Janou stated. It does have to go into the province, but there is every expectation that we will have the chance to look specifically at how we can advance the plan in our own ways, while of course also working with service agencies and other partners that are mandated to serve the United Counties, sometimes the United Counties and Lanark. So there's lots of need for collaboration and for dialogue, which is why the United Counties opted to work together in the development of the plan, so that that we could all benefit from the kind of conversations that are necessary, given how many municipalities these same service agencies are mandated to respond to. I see Mr. Dyke.
Thank you, Worship. Sorry, just to add to Ms. Janou's comments. Once we go through, and we will be looking for local involvement on the implementation of this plan, but once we transition from there, we will be reaching back out into our specific community in North Grenville to develop a more specific community well-being plan that focuses on our areas of need that is in alignment with the broader countywide plan as well. So this is not just a one and done process. It will evolve to the point where we're focusing down and mining down into the individual social and community needs of North Grenville itself.
Yeah, and I think that's well said. This was really a foundational document to assist municipalities sort of on identifying those areas. Some of them are not the same in all communities, but areas where community safety and well-being could stand to be improved. And then really will be up to municipalities to look specifically at how to make that happen, both collectively and individually. So think it was an important investment of time and energy by all of those who were involved. But really, quite frankly, what I'm excited about is really sinking our teeth into it. Really this fall, it really is, I think, it could happen alongside that community strategic planning process, where I think a lot of the gaps that do either compromise well-being of the community can also be identified, and we can use the plan and the further development of the plan as a mechanism to help resolve them. I'm not seeing questions from council. Oh, Councillor Barkley, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment. I know the timelines were rather tight, but as facilitated workshops go, I have to mention that the one that I attended as a member of the Police Service Board was very productive, and I thought it was very fruitful, the conversations that were had, and as often is the case in these kinds of group meetings, the networking was very valuable, and it's already benefit members of the community already in terms of putting people together who can work on some of these issues that were raised in that workshop. And so I too look forward to digging our teeth in more deeply in the fall, and I agree with you that as we go through the community strategic plan process, that it's great that we're talking about this at the same time with other members of the United Counties. So I thought it was a great process that we went through. It was very fruitful.
Great. Okay. Now I think there will be more to come, and a tangible example of I think where we need to go is a municipal drug strategy. Something again that Councillor Strachan and I think Councillor Barkley, you were at some preliminary meetings where we were exploring how to make that happen. And I think this strategy invites municipalities like ours to take another crack at that and look at the leadership of communities where agency partners that are funded by the province, that are mandated to serve our community, can really help to drive the development of some of those plans, given their insights and expertise. So I, again, look forward to the conversation in the fall about how we can identify and pursue some low-hanging fruit. So then if there's no other comments, and I don't see any, so if somebody needs to speak up, please do so now. I will ask Councillor Barkley, perhaps once again, you'd like to move the motion that council endorses the community safety and wellbeing plan for the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville and the town of Prescott as presented, and I'll look for a seconder, please. I see Councillor Sullivan, so thank you, and I'll call the vote unless there's other questions. Seeing none, calling the vote, all in favor. Good, thank you. So that's great. So then we'll go to the office of the clerk. I believe that we've accepted 3.1 as part of the consent agenda, Ms. Babcock-Cormier, and that would bring us to Public Works.
Correct, Your
Do I
Worship.
have that right?
You do, Your Worship.
Okay, so I think Ms. Dunlop, you're in the room this evening. Is that the case? Welcome. Okay, and I know this was on the consent agenda, but as you're aware, there was much discussion and deliberation, within I think your team and also with members of Tempo about how to address some road safety concerns. And I thought it would be worthwhile this evening to at least have you, I think, explain the rationale for the recommendation this evening. Thank you.
So thank you, Your Worship. I just had a few points to raise this evening and then anticipate questions. So just as per the council discussion that was held on June 1st and a review by the Public Works Committee, we are recommending for a temporary PXO at Spencer Drive and the Harvester Glen Crest intersection. This will be a level 2 PXO type D, which is basically a non-activated flashing light PXO. There's signage and line paintings. The PXO is classified as temporary due to expected developments proceeding on Spencer west of this intersection, which will require a review of the traffic operations and any developments and improvements required on that roadway. So that is just a couple little points, and I anticipate discussion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, is there any discussion on this point, colleagues? I don't necessarily see that there will be. And if there isn't, I'll look for a mover and a seconder, please.
Thank you.
Councillor Strachan, Councillor Barkley. And at this time, we are approving and enacting Bylaw 6721 to amend Bylaw 7318 to install a temporary pedestrian crossover onto Ponsia Drive at the Glen Crest Road Harvester Crescent intersection in the Tempo subdivision. If you could just help me, Director Dunlop, understand what temporary means, that would be useful.
Certainly. Temporary means that it still has the full effect and enforcement of a full permanent PXO, but the intent is that as developments, and there will be multiple west of the Tempo development onto Pencer Drive, it will be reviewed. So will it be there in a decade? Maybe, maybe not. There may be additional improvements that are required. And improvements, I mean traffic calming, PXOs, stop sign reassessments, etc.
Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues, on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the question then. All in favor? Good. Thank you. Director Dunlop, any sense of when the temporary PXO will be installed?
We will call for utility locates. We have ordered the signs, so I would think within the next 30 days.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. So we'll move on then, and that brings us over to Emergency and Protective Services. And Mr. Oakham, I think you're on, and I know Mr. Dyke has been following this file closely. I don't know, Mr. Dyke, if you want to introduce this at this stage. Of course, we've had one conversation about the county's effort around a regional fire service review. And again, I think the steps are extremely tentative, and there is no consensus at the counties in terms of any real move in this direction, but there was a dialogue about whether or not there were efficiencies that could be achieved through, I think, I'll say collaboration, if nothing else. So who would like to introduce this file? Mr. Dyke?
That'll be Chief Oakham, Your Worship.
Okay. Chief Oakham?
Thank you, Mayor Beckford. So in brief, the report this evening provides our council with the copy of the final report from the consultant that was attained by the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville. So just to quickly recap, in 2018, the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, they acquired the service of a consultant, Dillon Consulting. They were brought in to help provide County Council with recommendations on proceeding with a county-wide review of municipal fire service. The United Counties of Leeds and Grenville set out a request for proposal process for a study undertaking. And in January 2020, Minister Clark from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing identified that the United Counties was successful in acquiring a provincial grant under the Municipal Modernization Program, I believe in the amount of $120,000 to assist in carrying out the study. As a result, the request for proposal resulted in a firm called Pomax Consulting, Inc. That were retained to conduct the county required study. And they commenced that study and over a number of months conducted that study. The United Counties formulated a task force that did include some lower tier municipal CAOs and city manager that basically worked alongside of the consultant during the study process. And I believe it was March of this year that Pomax presented their final findings through their report to the United Counties Modernization Shared Service Task Force meeting. That final report was posted on the county's website and has been included as an attachment in this report this evening. That's the basis of the report, Madam Mayor, and happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Stark again, is there anything you'd like to ask in particular?
No, thank you very much for that update. I just, my questions are probably a little bit broad as far as this document goes. It's fairly lengthy. So there's quite a bit of detail in here, but I focused in on the recommendation, which I believe is one main recommendation for bringing services together, as well as the points that the chiefs responded to. And I'm wondering if there are any points in here that you feel are a particular concern for North Grenville moving forward, and also where this particular review goes from here. So if you could perhaps touch on both of those, that'd be appreciated.
Chief Oakham?
Absolutely. So I've certainly read the consultant's report and recommendations, and I can't really comment on the data that was been provided by the consultant. This was a very broad study that was undertaken for all lower tier municipalities within the United Counties. So I must note that this was not a North Grenville study. So there was not an intense study or a comprehensive study, I guess, on North Grenville. So the results of the study, I feel, are fairly broad in nature, encompassing fire services in general throughout Leeds and Grenville. I guess if we want to dive deeper into the study from a North Grenville perspective, that would require additional time commitment and resource to do a further study. But that has not been a proposal to North Grenville Council. Is not part of our current multi-year budget process as well. The fire chiefs have met and had very brief discussion on the study, as the fire chiefs were not directly involved in the study. We certainly participated by providing the information that was requested for the study. So there was no in-depth study done by the fire chiefs or at the lower tier level. I'm not sure if that answered all of your question.
So it certainly does.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Councillor Stark. I believe Mr. Dyke was trying to get in there. I apologize, I was on mute. I think he might be able to add some more in answer to your inquiry. Go ahead, Mr. Dyke.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. If Council indulges me, I'm going to be a little bit more pointed than Chief Oakham was in his response. The study itself was, in my opinion, there was a lot of assumptions made in the study that I don't think that were relevant. A lot of the pieces around the combining of the centralization of fire service for the entire county. And I think there were some, if I might, that were some wrong assumptions made on the benefit there may be to our community. I think the one takeaway we can get through the report is that there are things like joint purchasing, public education and training and initiatives that there would be a benefit to share with other services, but as a shared initiative, not as a centralization initiative. And I do share Chief Oakham's comments with respect to the study itself was done in a fashion by which there was not a lot of direct involvement from our municipality into the process. But I think it's a good point going forward that the fire chiefs are getting together and talking about ways they can create efficiencies through things like education and training and joint purchasing, yet that will just enhance the level of individual fire services we have within the county system.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dyke. Mr. Oakham, were you going to say anything else? Would you like to add anything else?
I think maybe just expand a little bit on what Mr. Dyke just said, that when we look at shared services, and this is important when we look at North Grenville, I just want to be clear to the council that North Grenville being part of the United Counties, Leeds and Grenville geographically and under the governing encatchment of the United Counties, it's important for council to understand that fire services have been doing for a very long time mutual aid and automatic aid, which is a joint service where we help and share services already, and through agreements, through bylaw agreements. And I just would also like to highlight on that North Grenville, in our unique geographical location, we're not only part of the mutual aid system within the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, we're also part of agreements with North Dundas, which is within the United Counties of, Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry. As well, we also have agreements with the City of Ottawa due to our geographical location. So we do have some shared services and agreements in place. So I just want to highlight that as well.
Councillor Strachan, anything else on this?
Thank you, Chief Oakham and Mr. Dyke. I think that my read of that was similar to what you were referring to, Mr. Dyke, that there seemed to be a lack of direct comments from places like North Grenville. You do a quick search on that, and there's a lack of specificity that I think is goes beyond just the statistics that are shown in the report. So I look forward to seeing what comes of this, and hopefully there'll be more engagement before final decisions are made at the chief's level, at the working level, so to speak, as opposed to the political level. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe in defense of the politicians, the United Counties received a very large modernization grant. And I think there was some questions among mayors about how to leverage those dollars to be meaningful. So you might recall that the province of Ontario, under Minister Steve Clark as Minister for Municipal Affairs, gave both municipalities and counties a fairly notable chunk of change, if you will, to look at how to modernize municipal government. And county colleagues at the United Counties thought it would be interesting, I think that's the only word I can use, to explore where there might be synergies in terms of fire services. That being said, I can tell you that county colleagues, political colleagues, mayors, have also been pretty clear that there's no interest in dissolving local fire services, just the opposite, but that there was some appetite potentially to look at joint procurement, those sorts of things, if they made sense. So I think in the discussions I've had with my county colleagues and with Mr. Dyke and Chief Oakham briefly, I think we all recognize that any deeper dive into this, as you say, Councillor Strachan, demands and requires much more familiarity with local terrain. And I'm not sure where this is going to go. The United Counties is getting a new CAO, and I'll go to Mr. Dyke in a second, I think, to supplement my comments. With a new CAO, with some new direction from County Council, there might be some pieces out of here that possibly get picked up in new and different ways. But I think we're nowhere near a regional fire service in any sense of the word. So just wanted you to have the benefit of some of that political discussion. And I'll go to Mr. Dyke to add more.
Yeah, thank you, and sorry for taking more time, but I think it's important from a process standpoint. It's very important for to understand fire service is a local municipal jurisdiction. So any decision made with respect to our fire service is the decision of this council and subsequent North Grenville councils. However, we're always looking for a way to create efficiencies in both in operation and financial efficiencies. And if there's ways to the chief's point, the great job they do in sharing service now through service agreements and other joint ventures, we're always looking at those. But our premise is, from a service delivery standpoint, it is our service, and we will always maintain it that way with the direction of council as we move forward.
Okay.
Just Mayor Peckford, if you'll indulge me for one last comment on this. I think it's the report is very thorough. There's a lot of information in there. I think it's unfortunate that the grant that was given didn't capitalize on also including the perspectives from the chiefs at the same time, because I think that perhaps this becomes a document with a single recommendation regarding the regional approach. Which isn't really it comes across as just, we've done our homework, here's our ideas. And I know that it's not the final decision, but I think that there was perhaps an opportunity missed to include that kind of information at this stage, rather than providing a full document wrapping it up and then trying to go back and review it. So anyway, like I said, the CAO has mentioned, it's not the decision that's only going to happen because of this report. There's more to follow from this. So I look forward to seeing what comes next.
Perhaps an example of another imperfect process. So these things happen. And I think we look forward to the new leadership at the United Counties, which may give us another opportunity. Who's to say? Okay. So thank you, Councillor Strachan. I think, I don't know. Yes, there is a motion. Perhaps, Councillor Strachan, you consider moving that council receive the report titled United Counties of Leeds and Grenville Regional Fire Service Review for information purposes and support the CEO and Director of Emergency Protective Services, Fire Chief, to be nominated as representatives of the United Counties Leeds and Grenville Fire Services Task Force if and when established. And I think the if and the when there are what's key, but it would make sense, I think, to have that representation. Are you willing to move that, Councillor Strachan? Thanks. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. I'm going to call the question on this. All in favor, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that takes us through emergency and protective services. We don't have any informational reports this evening. In the matters of correspondence, we've accepted the 3 sets of minutes in the consent agenda. I don't believe there's a notice of motion, but I'll look to colleagues in the event that one is about to emerge. Do not see a notice of motion, so I'll move on. And really, we're introduction, consideration of bylaws. I believe we've done that, Ms. Babcock-Cormier. I think you can confirm that.
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, so then we're at a period of questions from members of our community and media. I see Ms. Rachel Everett here, and I don't think I see anyone else. Ms. Everett, I think you're a member of the media. Any questions for us this evening?
I'm fine, thank you. Was a very thorough council meeting.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll just go to members of the public. I do see Mr. Lachance remains on the call. I believe he may be the only member of the public. Oh, I'm sorry, Debbie. There you are. I apologize. Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. So you have a question. Go ahead.
I don't have a question. I just had comments.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm showing my face now. I would just like to thank the council, staff, and Minister Steve Clark and his staff for indulging and staying the course with this this subject of the correctional facility that's coming to North Grenville. I, for one, I'm a long-time resident of this community. I see only good things that can happen from this facility coming to our community. I'm a business owner. I'm involved with a lot of volunteer boards and volunteer in this community, and I can only see good things. I grew up in the time here that Birch Rapids Correctional Facility was here. And as a child, I sat in the dentist office with Don Gilchrist's dentist office, and there were members of the correctional facility sitting there with us. And I know times are different now, but I had no fears. We played ball. Some of the men's league had people from the correctional facility playing in the ball league. So there's your softball question, John. I really have to admire our council for how they've handled all the questions and all the comments and all the negativity, and trying to turn it into a positive thing for the community. And I thank you. Your leadership is phenomenal, and your staff is just doing a great job. So thank you for letting me comment. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. We appreciate that. Any other comments before we close out this section? I'm not seeing any. No moves to unmute. That's the big cue these days on a virtual meeting. So with that, I will then move on. I'm not seeing any indications of others wanting to speak. So we'll go to the close of the meeting then, colleagues, and we'll go to the confirmation bylaw. And I'll have Ms. Babcock Cormier read that, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. That bylaw 68-21 to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on June 22nd, 2021 be adopted and passed.
We're going to seconder, please. I've got Deputy Mayor, Councillor Barkley, thank you. And I'll call the question. All in favor? Good, thank you. And then we'll motion to adjourn then. I'll take Councillor Strachian and Councillor Barkley a moving and a seconding of our adjournment at 9 p.m. You know, colleagues, these are distant days from our 11 o'clock adjournments. I feel so blessed anytime we adjourn before 9. So I know there was lots of discussion this evening and lots of engagement. Thank you. And I'll now accept that motion to adjourn at 9, and I'll call the question. All in favor, please. Good. And I'll leave you with this one word: participation. Go and get your minutes in if you haven't already. We've got 9 days to go, 8 days to go. So thank you to all those doing your part, and hope you'll continue to do so in the coming days. Every minute matters. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.